The Caltharian Empire had taken over 47 star systems in less than 100 years. Their ships moved through space like hunters. Their weapons could destroy anything. Their soldiers never felt fear. Admiral Vexthor stood on the control deck of his ship called the Sovereign Fang. His scaled hands were behind his back. He looked at the screen in front of him. Earth was spinning slowly on the display. It looked weak and easy to take. "How long before we can attack?" Vexthor asked. His voice was deep and loud on the bridge. 17 minutes, Admiral," said his officer Zephril. He was younger than Vexthor. "Our scouts say the humans have very few defenses in space. They have some satellites and space stations, but nothing that could stop even our smallest ship." Vexthor made a clicking sound with his mouth. This was how his people smiled. "They call themselves the strongest species on their world. They have barely left their planet, but they think they are ready for space." Taking over Earth was supposed to be easy. The Caltharian Empire needed another planet with resources. Early scans showed that Earth had lots of metal, water, and other useful things. The fact that smart beings lived there did not matter. The humans would be made into slaves or killed, whatever worked better. "Admiral, we are seeing one ship coming toward us from near the moon," Zephril said. He sounded confused. "It is small, very small, maybe 1/5 the size of our smallest ship." Vexthor looked closely at the display. A single red dot appeared. It was moving toward their fleet of 200 warships. It looked like the ship wanted to die. "What is it made of?" he asked. "Scanning now," Zephril said. "This is strange. The outer shell is made of titanium and steel. Those are old materials. There are no energy shields, no plasma power cores, no gravity controls. Admiral, this ship uses chemical fuel to move." The crew on the bridge started laughing. Chemical fuel. Calthari had stopped using such old technology more than 3,000 years ago. "They are sending us a message," another officer said. "Let's hear what these simple people have to say," Vexthor said. He was still laughing inside. The screen changed. A human face appeared. The man was old by human standards. His hair was gray and cut short. His face had many lines on it, but his eyes were sharp and clear. He wore what looked like an old military uniform. It was faded and had patches on it. "Caltharian Fleet, this is Captain Alan Price of the United Earth Space Command Vessel Legacy. You are in our space. You should not be here. Turn around now or you will face the results." The bridge crew laughed even louder. Even Vexthor made his clicking sound again. "Captain Price," Vexthor said. His voice was full of pride and meanness. "I am Admiral Vexthor of the Caltharian Imperial Fleet. You fly a ship that should be in a museum, if your people even have museums. You have no weapons that can hurt us. You have no defenses that can protect you. Give up now and your death will be fast." The old human's face did not change. "I will take that as a no then. Legacy out." The message ended. "Destroy it," Vexthor said with a wave of his hand. "Let the humans see what happens when they stand against the Empire." 3 smaller warships broke away from the fleet. They moved fast toward the tiny human ship. Their plasma guns started charging up. The energy readings went very high on the sensors. "The human ship is moving faster," Zephril said. "But Admiral, the speed it is reaching should not be possible with chemical fuel. It is moving at 0.4 light speed." "That cannot be right," Vexthor said. He was not laughing anymore. "Check the sensors again." "Already done, sir. The readings are correct." On the display, the Legacy became a line of light. It moved between the incoming plasma shots with perfect control. This should not have been possible for a ship of its size and old technology. The warships fired again. The empty space filled with bright blue energy, but the Legacy moved through it all. Then it fired back. The weapon was different from anything in the Caltharian database. It was not plasma, it was not lasers, it was not even solid bullets. It was something else. The first warship just disappeared. One moment it was there. The next moment it was gone. In its place was a round hole in space that closed in on itself. When the hole was gone a second later, there was nothing left. No pieces of the ship, no energy readings, nothing. The bridge became very quiet. "What was that?" Vexthor demanded. "Unknown, Admiral," Zephril said. His scales were turning pale, scanning the area where the warship was. "There is a gravity problem there, high radiation, but the ship itself is just gone." The Legacy fired again, and again. 2 more warships disappeared into those impossible holes. All ships, move to avoid being hit, Vexthor shouted. Battle positions. Bring that ship down. The Caltharian fleet of 200 ships turned all their attention to the single human ship. Plasma guns, missiles, and metal bullet guns all started firing. The amount of power being thrown at the Legacy could have broken a small moon. The old ship twisted and turned through space in ways that seemed impossible. Sometimes a plasma shot would hit its outer shell and burn the old metal, but the ship kept moving and kept firing. Each shot from its strange weapon made another Caltharian ship disappear completely. "How is it moving like that?" Vexthor demanded. "Chemical fuel cannot make those speeds or those moves." "Admiral, I am picking up strange readings from the human ship," Zephril said. His voice was shaking. "There is something inside it, a power source I have never seen before. It is not nuclear power. It is not antimatter. The energy reading is off the scale. What kind of weapon is it using?" "I do not know, sir. The energy spikes are focused. They seem to create artificial gravity holes, micro-black holes, but that should be impossible. The power needed would require a star's core." "And yet there it is," Vexthor said. He watched 5 more ships disappear. "Target that ship with everything we have, now." The Caltharian fleet put all their fire on one point in space. Hundreds of weapons came together. The Legacy disappeared into a storm of plasma and explosions. For a moment, Vexthor thought it was over. Then the Legacy came out of the fire. Its outer shell was black and marked but still whole, and it was moving straight toward the Sovereign Fang. "Move to avoid it," Vexthor ordered. "All close defenses, fire." The Legacy moved through the defensive fire. It closed the distance very fast. When it was close enough to see, Vexthor could see the ship properly for the first time. It was ugly by Caltharian standards. It was a blocky thing made of metal plates and rivets. It was burned and dented from many years of use. Written on its side, barely visible under the burn marks, were words in the human language. "What does it say?" Vexthor demanded. "It says UESCS Legacy Prototype 7, Zephril said. "And below that, first strike, last resort, prototype." The word made Vexthor feel cold fear. If this was a prototype, what did the humans have now? The Legacy fired its weapon very close. The hole opened right below the Sovereign Fang's control deck. Vexthor had just enough time to know his mistake before the gravity hole pulled him and his crew into nothing. Captain Alan Price watched the Caltharian main ship fall into the artificial black hole. He allowed himself a tired smile. His hands shook a little on the controls. This was because of too many years and too many battles. The reactor was running hot. The temperature meters were climbing into the danger zone, but it would hold. It had to hold. "Legacy to Earth Command," he said into the radio. "Main ship destroyed, continuing to fight." "Confirmed, Legacy," came the answer from the moon base. Lieutenant Karen White's voice was steady even though things were dangerous. "You have taken down 43 enemy ships. We think 157 remain." "How is the reactor doing?" "Like an old fighter," Alan said, "loud and angry but still working." "Sir, the fleet is regrouping. They are pulling back to a defensive position." Alan checked his sensors. The Caltharians were indeed coming back together. Their ships were forming a ball pattern. This gave them the best defensive coverage. Smart. They were learning, but the Legacy was built to fight against enemies who learned and adapted. "I am going in," Alan said. "Sir, with respect, your hull strength is at 60%. Your reactor is overheating. If you push it any harder—" "If I do not push it harder, those ships will start bombing Earth," Alan said gently. "We both know how this ends, Lieutenant. Let me do my job." There was a pause. "Good luck, Captain." Alan cut the transmission and changed his direction. The Legacy moved faster, pushing past safe limits. The old frame made loud noises but held together through stubbornness and good engineering. The human engineers who built the Legacy 60 years ago had known exactly what they were making. In the early days of Earth's first meetings with hostile alien species, humanity had quickly learned they were outgunned and out-teched in almost every way. Plasma weapons, energy shields, faster than light travel. All of it was beyond human ability at the time. So they had done what humans always did when facing a better enemy. They had gotten creative. The Legacy was built around one new technology. A zero-point energy reactor connected to a gravity hole maker. The science had been very advanced at the time. Even the scientists who made it barely understood it. The reactor drew power from tiny movements in empty space itself. This gave almost unlimited energy. The weapon used that energy to create and control micro-black holes with perfect aim. There were 7 prototypes. Only one survived the testing. The legacy. Alan had been a young pilot back then, fresh-faced and eager. He had been part of the test program. He had flown the legacy through situations that would have scared experienced pilots. He had watched friends die when Prototype 3's reactor exploded. He had pulled more G-forces than the human body should handle when Prototype 5's gravity controls failed. But he had also seen what the legacy could do when everything worked right. He had seen it dance through asteroid fields. He had seen it pull moves that physics said should be impossible. He had seen it punch holes in targets that were supposed to be safe. The prototype was difficult to control, dangerous, and old by modern standards. But in the right hands, it was still the most deadly ship humanity had ever made. When the Caltharian fleet had appeared at the edge of the solar system, Earth's modern fleet had been sent to the outer colonies. They were dealing with another alien attack. Earth was defended by space stations, a few small ships, and weapon platforms that would barely slow down the Caltharian Armada. Someone in Earth Command had remembered the legacy. It was stored in a moon hangar, and they had remembered Alan Price. He was retired but still alive at age 73. "They say you are the only one who can fly her properly," the general had said when they came to his apartment. Alan had looked at the picture of the Caltharian fleet and made his choice in about 3 seconds. Now diving toward the reformed Caltharian fleet, Alan felt the years fall away. His hands moved across the controls with muscle memory built from thousands of flight hours. The legacy responded like an extension of his own body. It rolled and moved through the incoming fire. He fired the gravity hole maker, and another Caltharian ship vanished. Then another. The enemy fleet began to break their positions. Their discipline was falling apart as ship after ship was erased from existence. But there were still so many of them. Alan's combat display lit up with warnings. Plasma missiles, dozens of them coming at him from many directions. He pulled the stick hard. This threw the legacy into a spin that would have made a younger pilot pass out. The ship made loud metal sounds, but it turned. It barely missed the first wave of missiles. The second wave was not so easy to avoid. 3 missiles hit the legacy's left side. The ship jumped like a hurt animal. Alarms screamed. The artificial gravity flickered. Alan was thrown against his safety straps. "Damage report," he said to himself in the empty cockpit. Old habit. The computer's voice was calm even though things were bad. "Hull break in sections 4 through 7. Reactor temperature critical, life support failing, structure strength at 30%. What about the weapon? Gravity hole maker working. 4 shots remaining before safety systems stop it. 4 shots. Over 100 enemy ships." Alan laughed. It was a dry sound in the damaged cockpit. "Well, let's make them count." He brought the legacy around for another pass. He aimed at the thickest group of Caltharian ships. The enemy ships were firing everything they had. The space between him and them was filled with enough power to destroy a continent on Earth. Alan thought about his daughter, safe on Earth's surface. He thought about the grandchildren he barely knew because he had spent so much of his life away from home. He thought about all the people down there who were watching this battle, hoping and praying that one old man in one old ship could somehow make a difference. Then he stopped thinking and just flew. The legacy dove into the heart of the Caltharian fleet. Ships were on all sides. They were so close that Alan could see the alien crew members through the windows. Their scaled faces were twisted with fear and anger. He fired the weapon and reality tore open. A dozen ships disappeared into the hole. 3 shots left. A Caltharian huge ship appeared ahead. It was massive and covered with weapons. Its main gun was charging. Energy was building to a level that would turn the legacy into vapor in 1 shot. Alan fired first. The huge ship and everything within 100 kilometers stopped existing. 2 shots left. The reactor was screaming now. Temperature meters were so far into the danger zone that they had stopped showing numbers. The weapon was drawing more power than the safety systems were built to handle. Alan could feel the heat through the cockpit walls. He could smell the bitter smell of melting wire covers. A Caltharian carrier moved to block his path. It was launching fighter ships by the dozens, small, fast craft that came at him like angry insects. "Computer, one shot, maximum spread," Alan commanded. "Warning, maximum spread setting will break the reactor. Complete failure likely." "Do it." The gravity hole maker fired. But this time, instead of one hole, dozens of smaller holes opened throughout the fighter swarm. The carrier and every fighter around it were pulled into nothing. One shot left. The Legacy was dying. Alan could feel it in the way the controls responded. They were slow and uneven. Half the systems were offline. The reactor temperature was climbing beyond the scale. The ship's frame was coming apart. It was held together by welds and prayers. But there were still 70 Caltharian ships out there. Then Alan saw it. The remaining Caltharian ships were grouping together. They were forming a tight defensive ball. From a fighting standpoint, it made sense. Put all their defensive fire together, protect the fleet. But it also meant they were all in one place. Alan checked the reactor readings. He made a decision that he had known was coming from the moment he launched from the moon hangar. "Legacy to Earth command," he sent. "Tell my daughter I love her. And tell the next group of pilots that the old bird still had some fight left in her." "Captain Price, what are you?" Karen's voice stopped as Alan shut down the safety systems. The gravity hole maker was designed with many safety features to prevent complete failure. Remove those safety features, turn off the limits, and override the emergency shutdown. Then the weapon would do exactly what the engineers had feared from the beginning. It would tear open a hole too large to control. Alan pointed the Legacy at the center of the Caltharian formation. He opened the speed control as wide as it would go. The old ship moved faster, pushing past every design limit. The frame screamed in protest. The Calthari saw him coming. They opened fire with everything they had. Plasma bolts, missiles, metal rounds, all of it coming together on a single beaten ship. The Legacy took hit after hit. The hull cracked. The cockpit window broke. The life support failed completely. Alan felt the air rush out into space. He felt the cold. He felt his lungs burning, but his hand was still on the trigger. He pressed it one last time. The hole that opened was not small. It was not controlled. It was a roaring, hungry hole that ate everything within 1,000 kilometers. Caltharian ships were ripped apart and crushed into nothing by impossible gravity forces. Even ships that tried to escape were caught by the pull. They were dragged backward into nothing. The Legacy went in first. Its job was complete. Captain Alan Price died as he had lived, at the controls of a ship protecting the world he called home. The hole lasted for 3 seconds before falling in on itself. When it was gone, the space where the Caltharian fleet had been was empty. Not empty as in destroyed. Empty as in erased. 70 warships, thousands of crew members, all of it just removed from existence. On the Moon Command Center, Lieutenant Karen White stared at the empty sensor display. Tears ran down her face. The combat board showed nothing. No enemy contacts, no friendly contacts, nothing. "Captain Price," she whispered into the radio. "Legacy, do you hear me?" Only static answered. Commander Greg Mason, the senior officer on duty, put a hand on her shoulder. "He is gone, Lieutenant, but because of him, Earth is safe." Karen wiped her eyes and sat straight in her chair. "We need to tell everyone. Every human colony, every friendly alien species, everyone needs to know what happened here today." "Agreed," Mason said. "What should we tell them?" Karen looked at the empty space on the sensor display where moments ago a battle had been fought. "Tell them that when the Caltharian Empire sent 200 warships to take over Earth, they were met by one man in one ship. A prototype, 60 years old, held together by welds and stubbornness. Tell them that Captain Alan Price flew the Legacy into the history books, and because of him, humanity survives." "And the Calthari?" Mason asked. "When they hear what happened to their fleet," Karen's face hardened. "Tell them what Captain Price told them. They were warned. They faced the results." The message went out across human space within hours. The story of the Legacy and its final flight spread like fire. Pilots raised drinks to Alan Price's memory. Engineers studied the battle recordings, amazed at the moves the old captain had pulled off. Politicians used the victory to get support for more defense spending. But it was the reaction from the wider galaxy community that surprised everyone. The Caltharian Empire, after losing their entire invasion fleet to a single human ship, immediately asked for peace. They offered trade deals, technology exchanges, and formal recognition of human territory claims. The other spacefaring species who had viewed humanity as a small species barely worth noticing suddenly took interest. Within a week, Earth received diplomatic messages from a dozen different civilizations. The message was clear. Humanity was no longer to be underestimated. In the moon hangar where the legacy had been stored for decades, engineers put up a memorial, a simple sign with the ship's service record and a quote from its final captain. "First strike, last resort. She never failed us." Above the sign, they mounted a screen display that ran continuously, showing the legacy's final battle. Visitors could watch as the old prototype, against all odds and all logic, took on an empire and won. The legacy's design was kept secret. Its technology was locked away in vaults that only a few people had access to. But rumors continued. Some said that Earth Command was working on new prototypes using lessons learned from the original 7. Others claimed that the technology was too dangerous, too unstable to ever use again. The truth, known only to a select few, was that there were no new prototypes. The scientists who understood the zero-point reactor had passed away. Their knowledge was incomplete. The legacy had been a flash of brilliance, a moment when humanity's cleverness had peaked, producing something that could not be copied. But that did not matter. What mattered was that every species in the galaxy now knew. Humanity had weapons that could erase ships from existence. They had pilots crazy enough to fly old ships into impossible battles, and they had shown that they would fight, give their lives, and die to protect their home. Lieutenant Corinne White eventually made captain herself. She commanded one of Earth's new cruisers. On every ship she served on, she kept a picture in her quarters. A faded photograph of the legacy, scarred and battle-worn. Captain Alan Price stood beside it, smiling at the camera like a young man instead of the 73-year-old veteran he was. "People ask me what humanity's greatest weapon is," she would tell junior officers during training sessions. "They expect me to say plasma guns or shields or maybe our new faster-than-light engines. But that is not it." She would point to the picture of the legacy. "Our greatest weapon is that when someone threatens our home, when someone tells us we cannot win, when every logical calculation says we should give up, we find an old man willing to fly an old ship into hell itself. We find a way to fight. That is what makes us dangerous. That is what makes us human." In the years that followed, the term "pulling a legacy" entered the galactic language. It meant refusing to accept odds, refusing to give up, and winning battles that should have been losses. It meant that humanity, despite being younger and less advanced than most spacefaring species, was not to be taken lightly. The Caltharian Empire learned that lesson the hard way. So did others who tested human resolve in the decades that followed. Some learned through peace talks, others learned through conflict. But they all learned the same basic truth. You could have bigger numbers, you could have better technology, you could have 1,000 years of military tradition and conquest. But none of that mattered if you underestimated human determination, human cleverness, and human willingness to give their lives for others. The galaxy had been warned. Alan Price's granddaughter, Nicole, grew up hearing stories about her grandfather's final flight. She had been only 5 years old when it happened, too young to truly understand. But as she grew older, she began to understand the size of what he had done. On her 18th birthday, she joined the Earth Space Command. Her father tried to talk her out of it. He was still sad about his father's loss even after all the years, but Nicole would not change her mind. "Grandpa did not give his life so we could hide," she told him. "He did it so we could live free. I want to make sure his giving meant something." She became a pilot, one of the best in her class. She never flew anything like the legacy. That technology remained locked away, but she carried her grandfather's spirit with her. Before every mission, she would tap the small photo she kept in her flight suit pocket. Alan Price, standing next to the legacy, smiling at the camera. "First strike, last resort," she would whisper. "Never failed us." And she would fly. Far across the galaxy, in the rebuilt capital of the Caltharian Empire, a museum displayed items from their species' long history of conquest. Among the displays of glorious victories and territorial expansions, there was one room that visitors found disturbing. It was dedicated to defeats, to battles lost, to lessons learned through failure, and in the center of that room, on a stand by itself, was a screen display. It showed the Earth and the Caltharian fleet approaching. It showed the Legacy launching from moon orbit, and it showed in painful detail what happened next. The display's sign was simple: the day the Empire learned humility. Caltharian younglings would stand before the display, watching in shocked silence as their mighty fleet was destroyed one by a single human ship. Their teachers would explain the tactical errors, the underestimation of the enemy, the arrogance that led to disaster. "This is why we study our enemies," the teachers would say. "This is why we never assume victory. The humans taught us this lesson. 200 ships and thousands of warriors paid the price for our arrogance." Some of the younglings would ask about the human pilot, the old one who died destroying the fleet. The teachers would bring up the limited information the Empire had on Captain Alan Price. He was aged by their standards, well past his best years. By all logic, he should have been retired, enjoying his final years in comfort. Instead, he climbed into a prototype ship that had been old for decades and flew it into battle against impossible odds. Why? A youngling would always ask. "'Cause his home was threatened," the teacher would respond. "Because his people needed him. Because humanity does not seem to care much about logic when it comes to protecting their own." The lesson stuck with every Caltharian who saw the display. Do not underestimate humans. Do not threaten Earth. And never ever assume that age or old technology means weakness when humanity is involved. Back on Earth, in a small cemetery in what used to be called Kansas, a simple stone marked Alan Price's grave. His body had never been found. It was turned to vapor in the hole along with the Legacy. But his family had put up a memorial anyway. The stone read, "Captain Alan Price, Earth Space Command pilot of the Legacy, he flew into legend." Every year on the anniversary of the battle, veterans and active service members would gather at the grave. They would share stories, raise drinks, and remember the day when one old man proved that humanity would never give up without a fight. And somewhere in the depths of space, in secret facilities that officially did not exist, scientists continued trying to copy the technology that made the Legacy possible. They had failed so far. They could not recreate the exact conditions that allowed for stable zero-point energy and controlled gravity holes. But they kept trying, because the galaxy was vast and full of species both friendly and hostile, because humanity needed every advantage they could develop. And because the Legacy had proven that sometimes the impossible was just another word for has not been done yet. Earth's defense system expanded over the years. New ships were built. They used advanced technology traded from friendly species and developed through human cleverness. The Space Command grew from a few dozen ships to hundreds, then thousands. Humanity spread across the stars, making colonies and forming alliances. But in every command center, on every capital ship, in every military academy, the story of the Legacy remained central to human military teaching. It was taught to every new student, studied in every tactical course, and held up as the example of what humanity could achieve when needed. Remember the Legacy became more than just a phrase. It became a way of thinking. When faced with bigger numbers, remember the Legacy. When your back is against the wall, remember the Legacy. When someone tells you that victory is impossible, remember the Legacy. Admiral Chen, who commanded Earth's defense fleet 40 years after the battle, kept a piece of the Legacy's hull metal in her office. It had been found from the battle site years after, a small piece that had been blown clear before the final hole. The metal was scarred and twisted by heat, barely recognizable as part of a spacecraft. "People ask me why I keep this piece of junk on display," she would tell visitors. "This junk is from a ship that saved our entire planet. This junk represents the moment when humanity told the galaxy that we were here, we were dangerous, and we would not be conquered." She would run her fingers over the scarred metal. The Legacy was a prototype, an experiment that by all rights should have stayed in storage. It was flown by a man who should have been retired, enjoying his grandchildren. And together, they destroyed an armada that should have been impossible to beat. It reminds me, she would continue, that victory does not always go to the strongest or the most advanced. Sometimes it goes to the most determined, and humanity has determination in large amounts. The galaxy had changed in the decades since the battle. Alliances shifted, new threats appeared, and the political landscape changed. But one thing remained constant: humanity's reputation as a species you did not want to fight. Other civilizations had better technology, longer histories, greater numbers. But humanity had something that could not be measured on a tactical display or calculated in a strategic simulation. They had the willingness to give their lives for others, the creativity to find solutions where none existed, and the boldness to attempt the impossible. The legacy had shown the galaxy what one human could do with an old ship and total conviction. The question that kept hostile species awake at night was, what could humanity do with modern ships, advanced technology, and that same conviction? It was a question nobody wanted to answer through direct experience. In the end, the legacy's greatest weapon was not the gravity hole maker or the zero-point reactor. It was not the ability to move or the design. It was the statement it made, the legend it created, and the message it sent to every species watching. Humanity would fight. Humanity would give their lives. Humanity would find a way. And that was worth more than 1,000 fleets. Captain Alan Price had climbed into the cockpit of the Legacy knowing he would not come back. He had made his peace with that, said his goodbyes, and done what needed to be done. In doing so, he had given humanity something no weapon or technology could provide. He had given them a legend to live up to. And humanity, being humanity, took that legend and built an entire future around it. They reached for the stars with the same determination that Alan Price had shown in his final flight. They faced down threats with the same courage. They refused to give up with the same stubbornness. The old prototype was gone, dissolved into a quantum hole along with its pilot. But what it represented lived on. In every ship that bore Earth's colors, in every pilot who pushed past their limits, in every person who looked at impossible odds and decided to fight anyway. The Legacy's final message had been heard across the human sphere. 3 words spoken calmly as the ship dove toward its final target. For Earth, always. Those words became humanity's battle cry. They were carved on monuments, printed on flags, and taught to every child in the solar system. They reminded everyone that when push came to shove, humanity would do whatever was necessary to protect their home and their people.